So just as an overall agenda for today, we'll do brief introductions of the ACT initiative and then elements of the ACT GLASS methodology in development so far. We'll then present to you the public consultation and how you can contribute further to the finalization of the methodology. And then this will be followed by the GLASS road test and how you can help test the methodology by getting involved as a company. And then we'll finish off with a recap and all the elements of how you can participate. So firstly, as an introduction to ACT, the ACT initiative is a global voluntary initiative co-founded by CDP and ADEM in 2015 after the Paris Accords. The objective of the ACT initiative is to provide an accountability framework for companies to assess their strategies and actions to contribute to the Paris Agreement's mitigation goal to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees. It's co-funded by EIT Climate Kick, and the objective of ACT is to design sector-specific methodologies which companies can use which can be used for company assessments against qualitative and quantitative indicators, and provide companies with a final ACT rating to understand their position in climate strategy and their readiness to decarbonize. So in terms of understanding ACT's position alongside other frameworks and initiatives, so if we look at the Paris mitigation goal as a marathon, we can start with TCFD, where an individual may consider the advantages of running the marathon alongside the risks and level of commitment required. Then CDP could represent sharing the current track record and performance in running of that individual. The science-based targets can represent the individual setting a goal to complete the marathon in a suitable time as they take part. And ACT will then determine whether the training program that they've developed in the lead up to the marathon is rigorous enough and will actually help them achieve the goal that they've set. So ACT really provides that accountability mechanism to help companies achieve their climate commitments. As an overall view of the sectors that ACT has worked on, so completed assessment, there are 8 which are available on the ACT website. And these they're freely available to view and and between 2015 and the end of 2020, and the team is currently since June of last year working on development of an iron and steel, agri-food and agriculture and generic methodology. And this year the focus of the ACT initiative is developing 4 new methodologies for the glass, chemicals, pulp and paper and aluminium sectors. So initially mentioned was the ACT rating that companies are provided with as a result of the ACT assessment. This is a 3-part score: a performance score, a narrative score, and a trend score. So the performance score is a numerical score that sits between 20 and 1 and measures company alignment with key performance indicators. So the 9 modules that you see in this table here are a mix of qualitative and quantitative modules and indicators which assess company performance. And then the narrative score is a summary of the whole assessment carried out by the analyst to look at the environment in which a company operates in. So overall business model and strategy, credibility of the company, risks that they may be exposed to, and then the third is a trend score, which looks at the future of a company. So if an ACT assessment were to be carried out in the future, what would be the change in the company's climate strategy and the decarbonisation performance overall? Would we see it change in terms of worsening, staying the same, or improving? by having these three dimensions, we allow a high level of detail for feedback to the company, and really allow that the accountability element to take place. So in terms of the performance score and the 9 ACT modules that we were referring to, we have module weightings. So depending on the that we are viewing and where the emissions and activity sit across those 9 modules, the weighting that these will hold will vary. So for example, if we have the 9 ACT modules across these bars and they make up the company's performance score, the width of the bar will tell you the weighting of that module. So you can see here, number 4, sold product performance holds the highest value, and supplier engagement is the thinnest, and that holds the lowest weighting. Within each of these modules, we will have indicators for that sector. And these indicators also vary with weighting. So you have module level weightings, and then you have indicator level weightings. And these are specifically to capture the activity of that sector accurately. It's not something that is applied at ACT level, but sector specific level. So now for details of the ACT glass method, I'm over to my colleague Edouard.
Okay, thanks.
Presenter, right? Great.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dua. So I will present briefly the ACT glass methodology before discussing about the public consultation and the road test. So for this methodology for the glass sector, the ACT methodology for the glass sector, of course, we developed this methodology thanks to the expertise of a technical working group. And so in this technical working group, we have participation of different stakeholders, business unions, technical institute, companies, academics, NGO, etc. And for this one, for the glass sector, so we have the participation of Technical Institute of Glass in French, companies like OI Glass, Owens Corning, Poche Group, Pyrex, Stolze Manière, Veralia, Arda Group, and AGC are companies involved in this technical working group. And we have also the participation of IEA, the World Benchmarking Alliance, Condriam, Agora Energie, and Velia, which is a consultancy. So that's a team for the development of the ACT glass methodology, in addition to the ACT team we presented at the beginning of the webinar. So about the key aspects and the key questions we wanted to address in the ACT glass methodology, here is a summary of this consideration. And so the first one is about the glass sector. How do we assess the different types of glass? Because we have the flat glass, hollow glass, and fiberglass mainly. So how we can cover those types of glass and the different specificities inside. The second question was how do we measure emission along different processing routes or technologies? We had also a question about the metric. What is a relevant metric in terms of emission intensity for the glass sector? How do we consider also the integration of cullet? And in other words, how do we consider circular economy in this methodology? And a topic which was and which is also important for the glass sector, is how an ACT methodology can take into account the decarbonization of other sectors thanks the use of glass products, like for example in building sector or other sector. So here are the key consideration we wanted to cover through the ACT glass methodology. About the scope of the methodology, so the companies that can be ACT assessed thanks to the methodology are really glass manufacturers. That means that we have and we find inside the scope the different types of glass manufacturers. So we have a flat glass integrated company, but also flat glass melters and flat glass shapers. For hollow glass, we have the hollow glass producers and the hollow glass melters. There was a discussion during the previous technical working group about the hollow glass shapers. For the moment, they are not included in the scope because the amount of GHG emission is not so much, but it's still in discussion. So there is a room maybe of improvement about that, but for the moment that they are out of the scope, sorry. And for fiberglass, we find the fiberglass integrated companies. We exclude from the scope the special glass integrated companies, and also the companies that are upstream, for example, silica miners, chemicals producers, or other raw materials extractors, and the companies that are downstream, the glass manufacturer, for example, the glass massification actors, the glass recyclers, or the glass traders are outside the scope. So the companies that can be act assessed are really related to the production and the manufacture of glass. About the boundaries now, the boundaries are the GHG emissions that are covered by the ACT methodology. And for the boundaries, so we consider all the direct and indirect emissions for a glass manufacturer. That means that for a glass producer, or a glass integrated producer, we consider direct emission related to hot end and cold end processes. So that's direct emission. We consider also scope 1 and 2 emission related to preparation and mixing. And we consider also indirect emission related to upstream processes and downstream processes, and for example, the extraction and production of raw material and the transport of the glass. So all the direct and indirect emissions are considered. For the flat glass shapers, that's the same. We consider all the direct and indirect emission related to the production of the shaping of the glass, sorry, and the production of the glass, which here is upstream, and with the downstream process for the transport. But in a general way, consider that all the GHG emissions and direct and indirect emissions are considered, and some aspects are excluded of the boundaries. For example, the manufacture of special glass products. It's a small thing, so which is not covered. About the low carbon scenario, if we want to consider and if we want to assess the low carbon strategy of a glass manufacturer, we need to compare this strategy and the objective to a low carbon scenario. And it was an important discussion inside the glass technical working group, because we don't have a specific low carbon pathway for the glass sector. So that means that we needed to consider other low carbon pathway, and the 3 other low carbon pathway considered were the absolute contraction approach with a well below 2 degrees approach for all the sectors, which considers a reduction of 2.5% of GHG emission per year. So that was a first topic. The second low carbon pathway was an industry pathway provided by IEA with the Sustainable Development Scenario. And the last pathway we identified was a pathway provided by IEA about EV industries, which is in green in this slide. So we have this 3 low carbon pathway for the glass sector, and we made an analysis with 2 criteria. Sorry, the first one was the ambition of the low carbon pathway, and the second one was the consistency with the glass sector for the low carbon pathway. And you have this analysis on the left side of the slide. So the well below 2 degree approach and the absolute contraction was very ambitious, but not so consistent for the glass sector. the heavy industry in green was quite ambitious and quite consistent for the glass sector, and the industry low carbon pathway was a little bit less consistent and a little bit less ambitious. So that's why when we discussed about that, absolute contraction approach or heavy industries could be used as proxy for the glass sector, but it's not satisfactory, and the ideal will be to build a specific pathway for the glass sector. And so the conclusion we had in the development of the glass methodology was to use the heavy industry intensity pathway as a proxy for the current version of the methodology, because it was the most consistent one and the quite ambitious one for the glass sector. But the step 2 would be to build a specific scenario for the glass sector, and for this we need to launch a study, a project, in order to develop a specific low carbon pathway for the glass sector. And for that, we are ready to consider the opportunity to finance part of this study. That was for the low carbon pathway. Now about a full overview of the modules inside the ACT Glass methodology. So as presented by Dua, we have 9 modules. With the module of targets, we want to assess the emissions reduction targets, and also we consider the time horizon of targets. So in order to have a short, medium, and long-term approach. With the module 2 about material investment, we focus on emissions from current and planned assets plus processes. So we are focusing on direct emissions for this module. About the module 3, about intangible investment, we consider the investment in R&D and low carbon technologies. And on the module 4, we consider the emissions of product in the full value chain with upstream processes and downstream processes. And so here we are focusing on indirect emissions. These 4 first modules are assessed quantitatively in the ACT assessment. And after, we have the other module which are assessed qualitatively. The first one is management. We analyze the management incentives and low carbon transition plan. With the supplier engagement, we assess the engagement with supplier in order to reduce their GHG emission. The same way with the client engagement. With the policy engagement, we consider and we analyze the company engagement with trade associations and climate policies at national or international level. And for the business model, we assess the development of viable low carbon business model from the company. And so in terms of weighting, because the different modules are weighted specifically to the specificities, issues, and levers for the sector, and here for the glass sector. And if you are an integrated and glass making only company, the most important modules are module 2 about material investment, or module 4 about sole product performance, depending on where your GHG emissions are. If you have a lot of direct scope 1 and scope 2 emission, we will clearly make a focus on material investment at 28%. If your GHG emissions are more related to indirect emission and upstream processes, we will do the focus on this module in the same way at 28%. So it's kind of a balance between direct and indirect emission. After that, the target module is weighted at 15%. The same for the business model. 15%, and the management 10%. And after we have immaterial investment at 9%, and supplier and client engagement between 4 and 8%. And for the product shaping only, it's a little bit different. So the most important one is the sole product performance, because all the GHG emissions are related to upstream processes, so indirect emissions. So we clearly make a focus on the sole product performance. After, the targets are weighted at 15%, sorry. Material investment at 10, management at 10 also, business model at 15, and after you have R&D at 4%, supplier and client engagement between 6 and 7%, and policy engagement at 3% at the end. What is important to note for the glass sector is regarding the consideration, for example, circular economy and the integration of cullet, this kind of consideration is integrated also in module 2 related to material investment. That means that inside this module, we consider emissions from assets and from future assets, but we also consider the management of integration of cullet, which is related to the GHG performance of the company. So that's the first consideration. About the consideration of avoided emission and the capacity to help other sectors to decarbonize, this kind of consideration is included in module about client engagement. So we have indicators related to that, and also about business model, avoided emission, or helping other sectors to decarbonize their activities. It's kind of business model we can assess in module 9 about business model, and which is weighted at 15%. For the public consultation, so it's a brief overview of the methodology. If you want to know more about the methodology, you have the possibility to contribute to the public consultation. So now this methodology is not yet finalized, but it's a full version of the methodology. And so we launched yesterday or today, it's just a question of hours, the public consultation for this methodology. And so how you can contribute to this public consultation. So this public consultation will be for 1 month. We started yesterday and we will close the public consultation at the 23rd of June this year. So it's a 1 month process. And if you want to contribute, you will have full access of the full methodology. We will also provide in few days a short version of the methodology. So you will have the full one and a short one if you want to go into details or just have a summary of the methodology. And you will be able to access this document on Scriber platform, which is a platform to provide comments and to react on the methodology. This platform, you will have a link on our website, which is precised here, actinitiative.org/participate. You have a direct link to the Scriber platform, and you will be able to provide some feedbacks and some comments to this methodology before the finalization and before the road test. And why you should contribute to this public consultation. The first reason is to share your sector knowledge alongside our multi-stakeholders technical working group, so to provide your expertise, to help us also to make the ACT methodology relevant across the globe and across the value chain for the glass sector. And it's the last opportunity to provide inputs and feedbacks before the finalization of the methodology and the road test. And so in details, if you want to contribute, it's very simple. If you want to provide comments, so here is a screenshot of the Scriber platform. And so the methodology is divided into parts and into paragraphs. And for each paragraph, you will be able to provide a comment by clicking on the plus image icon. So that means that here, for example, if you want to make a comment on the scope of the sector, you have to click on the plus and you can provide your comment. The most important, I don't know if it's the most important, but a paragraph you should consider for the methodology is a paragraph number 5 about the construction of the data infrastructure. In this paragraph, you will have the full list of modules and the full list of indicators for the glass sector. So it's an important part. We have also other parts you can consult, but this one is quite important. And how the methodology is structured for each indicator. For example, here you have a screenshot of one indicator in the ACT glass methodology. It's related to the company low carbon patenting activity. So the first information is what kind of indicator and what is the associated module to this indicator. For example, here it's indicator 3.2. That means that it's the second indicator for the module 3 on R&D. You have a description of the what. That means that you have a description of the indicator, describing generally the philosophy of the indicator. And after you have elements about the how. That means that you have the data requirements for the assessment of the indicator, how the analysis will be done. And at the end, you have the why questions. That means that for each indicator, you have also the rationale of the indicator, giving information on why we decided to provide this indicator, to assess the indicator, and why we do the assessment in this way. So for each indicator, you will have the same structure, the what, how, and why. And so it's quite easy to provide comments on a part of an indicator. And now I will leave the floor to Dua in order to provide some elements about the road test, which will be the next step after the public consultation.
Great, thanks, Edouard. So yes, with the public consultation, you'll have the full view of the methodology and provide comments. And once we have that, we can move towards a somewhat completed version that can be tested. And this is what the road test phase is all about. So in September 2021, we'll launch the glass road test, which allow us to take the methodology from theory to application. And we'll pilot test the methodology with real data from glass companies. And it's a free act assessment, and it really allows us to further modify the methodology and gather feedback to see what works for the sector and what doesn't work in different aspects. So in terms of scope, in terms of emissions boundaries, the data requirements, and elements of the value chain that should be considered. And the goal of it is to really capture the value chain representation for the sector, and also a geographically diverse group of companies, because ACT does take a global approach for all of its sectors, and there is space for 15 companies to take part in the road test. The motivations for the road test is one, to benefit from a free ACT assessment of the company's low carbon strategy. So tailored feedback for the company on their environmental performance, supported by the ACT 3-parts goal. The tailored recommendations on alignment with the Paris Agreement goal, and also be able to share your expertise to improve the methodology. So while the public consultation is allowing comments on the document, by actively taking part in the road test, it's a application method of sharing expertise. It also gives you an opportunity to showcase your efforts to reduce GHG emissions to partners and investors once you have the resources, like the report and the scores following the road test. And it also gives an opportunity to benefit from training on the ACT methodology, and an accountability mechanism the Paris materials as the ambition. In terms of the schedule, so the kickoff is scheduled for September of this year, with a kickoff meeting with each individual company. Each company is assigned an analyst that will lead their assessment. After the kickoff meeting, which is introductory and presents the methodology in greater detail, the next step is the data collection with the company. So all of the data requirements are listed in the full methodology, and the analyst will be able to support the company in gathering all of it. After which, the analyst will take over and carry out the company's assessment. Once this assessment is complete, the analyst can provide tailored feedback and scores to the company. And while we have the technical working group that has supported us with the methodology development so far, we will reconvene at the end of the road test process with both the methodology development technical working group and the companies participating in the road test to discuss what were the lessons learned from the road test and what improvements are coming to the methodology as a result. In between September and February, the frequency of meetings between the company and the analyst is really between the company and the analyst as we take a flexible approach for the assessment and the data collection. But the level of involvement where the company is most required is at the data collection phase, because that's really where we want to tap into your expertise and information from your company. So as an example of the methodologies that we have developed in the past, so taking transport, oil and gas and cement as an example from last year, these are some of the participating companies from the road test. So we were lucky enough to have up, mid, downstream companies represented along the value chain, different modes of transport represented, as well as a geographical diversity. So we have European, North American, as well as East Asian companies taking part. So we are very lucky to have this diverse group, and this is also our ambition going forward for the 4 sectors that we're working on for 2021. So just a few examples of the feedback that we've got from companies that have participated in the road test in the past. We have some comments in terms of recommendations, such as clarifying the value chain for the sector, making clearer what the rationale and data requirements are for each indicator in the performance module. We also found that some companies thought that it was useful to, the analyst provided a comprehensive perspective, and it was useful to have a sector-specific assessment of the climate strategy than a generic assessment. And while companies may operate in one specific part of the world, they found it useful to be assessed using a tool that takes a more global perspective for their sector. Some also found that there were tough questions that were being asked, that they provided useful insight for their future planning of their climate strategy. And we also found that some indicators were not applicable to every company. So it was more thought needed to be put into reviewing these indicators for the entire value chain to capture activity accurately. And towards the end, when companies did receive their ACT score, they found the ACT score extremely useful in terms of communications. So they were happy to share their score with stakeholders and use it as a tool to demonstrate where there's areas on room for improvement in their climate strategy going forward. So just in terms of some outputs, guarantees and commitments from the road test, some of the elements that I've already mentioned during the call. Firstly, you'll have an individual company report. So this is tailored to the company. It provides the full score breakdown of the company and recommendations for improvement on climate strategy. The second is a full road test public report, and this is at sector level. So a summary of the road test and aggregated anonymized company scores, as well as a score, average score for the entire sector. And the third is a methodology feedback report, which lists all of the suggested modifications that are coming to the methodology as a result of the road test. So if we take the individual company report, this could be an example of a graph from the slide. So you have the company score for, in this case, it's 10C equals. This is from a past road test. You can see the weightings are varied for each module depending on the sector, and this is the final score for that company. Within the report, for every score in the ACT rating, you'll be able to see the detailed review and breakdown of the modules and indicators, where the positive trends lie in the company and where there's room for improvement. The narrative score looks at overall narrative and level of ambition that the company has within its sector, and then a breakdown of the 4 indicators that make up the narrative score in terms of credibility, reputation, and then the final trend score is the analyst's outlook to the company's future based on this current analysis, and provide some recommendations on how the company can be more low carbon transition aligned going forward. And one of the most important elements is the principal data sources that the analyst has used. So a list of all of the relevant sources of data that the analyst has combined, whether it comes from the company or externally, such as their CDP response, and explicitly provides these within the feedback report, so the company knows exactly where their data came from. For the second full road test public report, this is an example from the transport road test. We have the average of the sectors ACT rating. They received 8C+, where the individual company scores sat between 4 and 12, and the average score for quantitative and qualitative performance modules. So at this public report, as we guarantee confidentiality, the scores are provided anonymously and only at the aggregate level. Individual company reports only include the scores for the company, and they're not communicated beyond that. And the third methodology feedback report, which is pretty simple, the suggested modifications to the methodology before publishing the methodology online on the ACT website. Some guarantees from the ACT team. Firstly, data confidentiality. Data will remain confidential between the development team, the analyst, and the company. Your individual ACT score will also remain confidential, and there's an opportunity to sign an NDA between them and consultants, so that you can guarantee privacy of company data. The training opportunity that I mentioned previously, the analyst will be fully trained in the ACT initiative and the sector methodology prior to the road test. So they will be coached in, and be proficient in the assessments. And a full-day ACT assessment training is also available to the company if they wish to take part. And throughout the process between September and February, the ACT team remains at your disposal for questions and concerns throughout the road test. So commitments that we ask for from companies is, one, to select a project lead. That's our main point of contact for the road test. The second is collect data required for the ACT assessment using all of the data points listed within the methodology. Overall, we think the time commitment lies between 5 to 10 working days for the road test, so to be actively engaged throughout this process from initiation to completion. And agree that CDP and ADEM can communicate about the road test, but again, the sector level aggregated anonymized scores and not the individual company scores. If I zoom in on the data collection point required for the ACT assessment, at a glance, at a very high level, some of the data sources that we reach out to is CDP response data, if you disclose to CDP. annual reports and company CSR reports, and then reaching out directly to you for a data request using the data points in the methodology. And the sort of data that we're after is, for example, the types of glass that you're producing, flat glass, hollow glass, fiberglass, emissions intensity and absolute targets that have been set, assets and plants and their lifetimes, expenditures in R&D, management of color integration, and sources of energy and power for your activities. And list is not exhaustive, so if you would like to view this entire list, it's available in the methodology in the public consultation. So I will just launch a poll to see if based on what we presented, there's interest in the road test, if you'd like more information and details on how to take part. You should be able to see it on the right-hand side or in the middle of your screen. I'm not sure how WebEx shows this with the participants. I'll just give you a few seconds to complete that. Okay, great. Thanks for your feedback. I'll close the poll for now. And I'll just hand over back to Edouard to recap what we covered, and then we'll have time for some questions. Edouard, I'll make you the presenter.
Yeah, thanks, Dua. So just a recap on how to participate. So the next two steps, I hope it's clear now. The next step is first is a public consultation. So in order to provide some feedbacks and some comments on the Act Glass methodology. So between the 26th of May and the 23rd of June. So it's now during 1 month. And all stakeholders can contribute. So do not hesitate to provide feedbacks, but do not hesitate also to share the public consultation and the link with other interested parties that could be interested to provide some comments and some expertise in order to improve the Act Glass methodology. And it's the last and final consultation before the road test. So that's for the first next step, and the second one, as described by Dua, it's a road test itself between September this year and February next year. And so the idea is to experiment with a voluntary company, with 15 voluntary companies, the ACT Glass methodology in order to identify the strengths and weaknesses and to improve once again the methodology. And so if you're interested in this road test, you have to submit terms of references by the 27th of August if you want to take part to this road test. As described by Dua, if more than 15 companies apply, ADEME and CDP will select a sample of companies considering different aspects like the size of the company, the geographic distribution, and the activities carried out by the company in order to have a well-balanced sample at the end. So if you have a question, do not hesitate to come back to us, to Dua or to me. You have our email addresses in the slide. And so we give you once again the link in order to access the public consultation, but also the terms of reference for the road test. And so it's actinitiative.org/participate. I guess, yeah, it's all for the GLASS methodology. Here you have the full overview of the whole team for the ACT initiative in ADEM side and CDP side. And so we can now answer your question if you have some question about the ACT GLASS methodology, about the public consultation, or the road test. So do not hesitate to ask your question. Thanks the Q&A box in WebEx. We have 5-10 minutes to manage this. And maybe to launch the question, a first question I can have for Dua. You made a focus on data collection. It's not a so specific question, but could you precise, Dua, at what extent CDP response data could be included in an ACT assessment, and is it really helpful? If you have some clues to provide to your to our attendees, do not hesitate.
Sure. So for the qualitative modules in particular, so management, policy engagement, supplier client engagement, and business model, these can be directly mapped to the CDP questionnaire. So GLASS companies complete the general questionnaire for CDP, and we can take those data points forward straight away. In terms of emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, depending on the level of granularity that companies companies report, many of these can be taken forward. But what we found, not just with GLASS, but with other sectors, these are complemented by specific data points from the companies directly as well. So it's likely that asset and emissions data will be required from the company representatives.
Okay, thanks Dua for this clarification on how the CDP data can be used in an ACT assessment. I don't know, maybe I don't want to make mistake, but I don't see any question on the Q&A box, except the fact that this webinar was organized in order to present you the next steps for the ACT GLASS methodology development, so about the public consultation and the road test. We have few minutes left. Just maybe we could, as we are supported by iCare and Solinen for this methodology development, but also for the road test. That's not the first time Solinen and iCare will do a road test for us. So I don't know, Cécile or Lucie or both of you, if you want to maybe to provide some elements on how the road test will be done and how it was done for other sectors.
Yes, maybe I can say a few words, and Lucie could complete. We have already done the cement road test last year with Lucie and iCare side. For the data collection, we have done some few meetings, two meetings per month to follow the data collection from the company, and also to answer to the question on the questionnaire. So I think we will do the same things to be sure that the data collection should be complete at time. And after that, we analyze the data collected, and if we have some question, we come back to the company to validate some data. And as you presented, we have a first final meeting before the technical working group to ensure that the company understand well the result of the assessment. I don't know if you have some specific question on the word test, but I can answer if you have.
Okay, no specific question on the Q&A box. Just to have a feedback on how the road test can be done and what is the relationship between the consultant and the company.
In Solinen, we are 4 people to do ACT assessment, who are trained to do the ACT assessment. So me and Salome here, but also 2 other people who are working on the aluminium development, and they have worked before on the other methodology development. And also we will include a consultant, another consultant from Novasir, Idris Katrada, to support us during this road test too.
Okay, thanks, Cécile. I don't know, Lucy, if you want to add one word about that.
No, just maybe it's important that the consultants are really available for the companies to discuss any questions they have and any data they want to clarify with us. We always remain available, and we can also discuss with the difficulties to also improve the methodology, because it's also the point of the road test. So it's really open to discussion with the companies that are involved in the road test.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Cécile, for these words and elements. We are at the end of this webinar. If I missed something, if I missed a question, do not hesitate. But just to recap and to conclude, so yeah, public consultation, it's a great opportunity to improve the methodology with us. And after the road test is the best opportunity to have an ACT assessment for free and to be prepared to this kind of exercise. So it's really a great opportunity. So do not hesitate to take part. You have time to think about your participation until end of August. But if you are interested, or if you have any question, do not hesitate to contact us directly. Dua, if you want to say something before we close the webinar.
No, just to echo your sentiments. I'm looking forward to having companies participate in both the consultation and the methodology. And yes, our email addresses are in the chat if you would like to reach out, and we'll share the recording and the slides in a few days, so you have them at your disposal.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dua. Thank you all for your participation. And so we hope to see you soon in the public, thanks to the public consultation, or thanks to the road test.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.